Welcome to the panel discussion, Security and Finance. To start with, I would like to thank the partners of the conference. Main partners including the Ministry of Finance of the Slovak Republic, the National Bank of Slovakia, Visa, Binance, BLIK, and 365 Bank. Supporters including Portu, CRIF, Slovak Credit Bureau, and Fumbi. Expert guarantees, of course, FINAS, the Fintech and Insurtech Association of Slovakia, which is great to work with, which have the expertise in the field. And I would like to introduce my panel here. We have Mária Potančoková, experienced AML expert. We have Lukáš Bonko, co-founder of L.Steiniger law firm. Lukáš Bonko, our AML expert, and Juraj Forgács, CEO of Fumbi. So we have a great panel, and we're talking about security and finance. So hopefully we will not only talk about AML, but a few attached subjects as well. So that is the panel. And we're lucky, the whole panel is here. No online panel this time, which I do appreciate. Mária, as an AML expert, what do you think are the main challenges, hurdles with AML in Europe now, given the current situation and geopolitical situation?
Okay, so nice to meet you all. First of all, I'm really glad for this opportunity to be here. And yeah, it's quite a tough question for the beginning of this panel discussion, to be quite honest with you, because there are a lot of challenges and open topic in the field of AML regulation, sanctions compliance, etc. Take Russian recent invasion in Ukraine as an example, and basically what we can see in field of all AML regulation is that there's a significant shift from basic AML due diligence sanction compliance towards the sanctions, because prior the Russian invasion, correct me if I'm wrong here, but sanctions was not even like real topic in terms of obliged entities, regulations, etc. It is like it's something you recognize you are supposed to do it. Of course, there's a law, and it's like, okay, sanctions. We do some sanction screening. We do have some procedures for that. But yeah, it's pretty much it about the from the perspective of regulated subjects. But once we've experienced the invasion from Russia to Ukraine, it was like the all topic that matters in terms of regulatory framework for EMI, banks, payment institution, crypto firms, especially crypto firms, I would expect, because it's like, okay, you process payments via some correspondent banks, or maybe you have direct access to clearing, and now all of a sudden everybody's asking, okay, and tell me more about your compliance. By the way, how are you handling it? Are you able to recognize the sanctions entities in your books, in your payment processing? So yeah, that's a huge challenge to name just one.
Okay, and since you're representing TrustPay, what is TrustPay doing in this area?
Well, TrustPay was always, fully compliant in terms of both AML and sanctions. I believe we are a really good example in, sanctions, screening compliance, and all the stuff. It doesn't really code us red-handed in terms of that, but I believe this is mostly topic about some small entities, some startups, which TrustPay is definitely not. Maybe there's good questions about how crypto companies handling this topic, whether they may be even able to comply with all those regulation challenges in terms of this topic. It's not that easy. So I may appreciate some input from
Juraj, please.
I think I need to step into the ring here a little bit. So thank you for having me. What I would like to highlight here is that the situation is nothing new to us, because there has been very hard stance towards crypto companies in traditional finance sector since ever, and TrustPay can witness to that. Even if they are open to some extent to crypto business models, still they are considered risky, and they need to apply some additional measures. And this is actually something that everybody does and has been doing since like 1 or 2 years. And by everybody, I mean everybody who even wants to do it, because majority of banks and financial industry partners just don't want to deal with it. But those who want, those strictly check if the crypto company is compliant or not, and how the compliance is done. And basically, if we want to onboard with a fintech company or a bank, we usually agree upon sample procedures on a weekly basis, where we prove case by case that all the compliance steps were taken as scheduled in our AML policy. So that's something that has been here for a long time. We have not seen any specific increase of the demand, but what I can say is that it's very difficult to do real AML and the real counterterrorism financing prevention if crypto companies and banks just do not cooperate. So if we need to go to Lithuania to get a bank account, then it's quite difficult for Slovak Financial Intelligence Unit or for the police to be able to deal with it. And basically what we agreed is that we will be the one who would be freezing the funds actually on crypto account rather than in the traditional banking environment. It would happen probably on the customer's account in the bank. So it's quite complicated, and what I can see is that there is some also shift towards counterterrorism financing activities, which are quite different from AML in terms of the focus, and it's not only about prevention but about the quickness of reaction if there is a threat, and that's something that is very interesting to me and something that we also want to focus on.
Thank you. And Lukáš Bonko, what is your take in general terms on AML and the current situation?
Well, as was already said, nowadays companies are looking on the sanctions list, and what has happened in the Ukraine and Russia has changed plenty of things in the response of the new sanctions. And now it is really important that every company rechecks their portfolio of client, reperform the customer due diligence, and I think it is best if the company has every procedure automatized, because mostly the smaller companies are doing this in manual way, and this is not an option for the future. If you want to onboard more clients, you need to have some level of automatical procedures to recheck and to request update of the due diligence documents and so on. But I couldn't agree more that it is very important that the sanctions are followed. It is a current topic because Slovakian companies and in general European companies have or had plenty of clients from the Russia and sanctioned countries. But new risks in the AML regulation has arisen. I can mention one company in Slovakia, which is quite unlucky that they have completely same name as a company on the OFAC list, what is the sanction list, and they were actually frozen on some transactions, especially outside of the EU, and they are not linked to Russia anyway. So I would suggest to any company to check also deeper whether the company is actually on the sanction list, because you can hurt your clients and they should be just unlucky because of the name. So this is one thing what the old level of automatical and digitalization procedures omitted, that there should be also the second level, deeper level checks, and more companies getting into the trouble. And then there is a problem with the regulatory authority, of course, when they receive plenty of STRs or suspicious transactions reports, they are not able to respond in quick way. I'm speaking generally not about Slovakia, but in general way. So this is something to be improved on the level of the companies, not to have reports which are not valid, and on the level of the regulatory authorities to have prompt response to any STR. And definitely we should also focus on the new obliged persons, because from the beginning of the AML regulation in the EU, every year or every iteration of the AML directive, now we have fifth, sixth is ongoing, we receive new obliged persons, and I see big potential for the education of the companies, because on the new lists are companies which are not aware that they are somehow obliged to do something in the AML. So I think the education of the companies is very important.
Just a quick reaction to one of the topic mentioned, which I really appreciate, which is the false positive problem in terms of sanction screening compliance. And I really appreciated input. And yeah, we can say, well, tough luck, you have like the same name, company name, like the entity on the sanction list. But that's not how we should actually approach this problem. I couldn't agree more, because it's like when in terms of sanction screening compliance, you have a lot of false positive, and there actually are ways how to detect whether the company in the payment details is the same as the company identified on the sanction list or not. There are ways to do it, but it's well, imagine you have like 30, 40 payments in real-time block monitoring for the sanction screening compliance. It's not even possible for, I assume, for smaller entities like startups, maybe companies just recently established in terms of payments or crypto space. We can't really expect for them to employ or hire 3 to 5 people just to manage sanctions compliance. So that's a huge topic that needs to be discussed openly with regulators and financial intelligence units as well.
One remark, isn't that where RegTech comes in reality? So you can eliminate 5-6 people doing compliance?
Yes, and I would like to say that false positives, I think that's a completely usual daily situation, and usually correct positives or the true positives are quite rare. So, but it has also another angle to it. If your funds get frozen because the company didn't check if you are or if you are not on the sanctions list, then your rights have been clearly violated, and the company most definitely is liable for any damages that may arise from that. And this reminds me of the other problem in the financial sector when it comes to AML, that's called de-risking, and we are back to crypto companies. So if it seems easier to just do it somehow in bulk and don't care for the collateral damage, then such situations arise, and they will arise. So the RegTech is very, very important here, and I would say that it doesn't solve all the false positive cases, of course, but it can substantially reduce the load.
Yeah, exactly. I would just come into it. We have quite experience with that with several clients, especially from the crypto world, today because we are specialized mostly on crypto. And we see, for example, that we have many clients from outside Europe, but establishing their presence currently in Europe. And they fall under the regulation, so they have to somehow be in compliance with it. And the point is that they actually do not need to have physical presence here, but they need to fall under the regulations, and especially when it comes to AML, to fulfill some obligations towards local authorities. Yeah. But they're actually doing it very well because they use modern technologies, which is decreasing number of manual input they have to get into it. And it's like really 90% of cases is handled by automated solutions. And then they can have one internal guy, which doesn't have to be Slovak guy, who will only then after they check the situation, which if there is something person which is on sanction list, or if there is operation which might, or there might be a problem there, it was not text and so on. And then they can have one man in Slovakia who will just communicate with government and go for it. But it's really minimum cases which are really then only complicated. So automated solutions can today also for really, I would say, not small companies, but for like serious companies handle most cases.
That's good to hear. So you as working in the law firm, you work as a liaison between the Slovak authorities as well as the foreign entities, or can you please describe that process as well?
How does it work when foreign entity?
Exactly.
Well, for example, we work with clients on, there are several models how to work, but when we have like small crypto exchanges or small crypto clients, they have one AML officer, which is working with this Slovak guy mostly, who is working in a team with the developers and the management and so on. And they get support from Slovak law firm, for example, if they need to handle or evaluate cases which are really urgent, or they have to really somehow communicate with financial unit and so on. And it doesn't have to be costly, actually, because, as I said, most cases are dealt by automated solutions. And then when you need to, somehow use the law firm, then you will use it.
Obviously, very good. That's a clear answer. I would like to get back to Lukáš Bonko. You mentioned European Union and regulation per se from Brussels or higher authorities. Do you think the AML framework should be changed or implemented differently? Do you think we need more input from Brussels to ease the current situation, or do you think it's good as it is?
That is a very good question. And I think it should be improved. I'm not saying about easing the regulation, but rather to have a look on the efficiency and unintended consequences, because the regulation in current way was implemented from the point of view that, okay, this is our aim, this is our target, we want to do something, but it was only in the way that you have seen the AML problem, CFT problem, but they did not correctly measured the impact, the unintended consequences. As was mentioned, the risking is one of the problem. Debanking is the problem. It means that the financial companies rather get rid of the riskier clients, or the clients which could be on some sanction list, but at the end they are just a false positive. And now we can lose the GDP, we can lose the companies in Europe. They can go to different countries outside of the EU. So I think we are losing the potential. We are creating not just the bureaucratic burden, but as well the burden in the meaning of the costs for the companies. So definitely we should see more risk-based approach, which is obviously mentioned in the regulation, that there is some proportionality and so on. But there is something called national risk assessment. And within this national risk assessment, there should be some level of the measure of costs of AML within the companies, and what is actually the regulatory authority getting from the regulation. So you should have a scale with the weight of the costs and way of what have you achieved, whether the costs are not higher than the achieved aims. And this should be within the statistics of all EU countries. And on the basis of results, we should have a look on the best practices on the countries which have the most efficient regulation and most efficient way of implementing AML to change it in the correct way. Now, this is probably not done properly on the EU level. Let's go into the outside of the financial world. We have some car accidents. We have proper car accident statistics. And obviously, what is the easiest way to get rid of the car accidents? Okay, you decrease the maximum speed, let's say to 20 kilometers per hour. It means that, okay, probably you will get much less car accidents, but the impact on the overall economy will be huge. Let's imagine that everybody will be driving 20 kilometers per hour. So we are taking some risks to allow cars go faster. We know that it will be easier maybe to ban all the cars, but we actually do not do this thing. And the same approach should be in the future considered in the changes of the AML, to weigh the risk and to decide what is the best way to do it, not just to decrease the output of our companies and our economies, and to attract new companies into the not just the financial sector. And it is very important to consider European borders. Of course, what is happening in the EU should be discovered and controlled by other authorities, not just the financial authorities, but the standard enforcement units like the police and so on. And we should definitely control our borders. What's happening on the transactions outside of the borders of the EU. So when the company is receiving money outside of the EU or is sending money outside of the EU, okay, this is the border control for the financial transactions. Where should we be focused more, I think? Because the AML is actually not the primary problem. This is just the consequence, because when somebody needs to launder the money, it means that there was a crime which was not caught by the police before it happened. So this is like some kind of outsourcing of some law enforcement obligations to private sector. I think AML is good, but it should be improved and to be more efficient, and definitely there are best practices which can be followed by EU in the future.
So in other words, a little bit eased within the union and harshened on the borders to the union. So to make compliance inside the EU easier to follow.
Yes, especially for the startup companies, because it is difficult for startups to establish a company, and first thing you need to think of is, okay, that you need to hire a team of the compliance guys, and you don't have the sales, you don't have the technical persons and so on, but you need to first think about the compliance, what is in some way very good, because you are doing a good thing for the end customers and you are protecting the customers, but there should be some proportionality and to level all the requirements of the compliance and of the business. So.
Even large banks fails, not only startups in this area. So there's many cases in the European Union when large banks been debanking fully legal customers due to false positives, and people's companies have went bankrupted, and there have been lots of tragedies in this also from debanking from large banks. So it's not only the startups that makes mistakes here.
That's correct. Yes, and the difference between the large bank and the startup is that the large bank can withstand some kind of fines, but startup cannot. So the fine for the startup can be like complete disaster, and the business can be closed down. But larger banks, larger financial institutions can withstand this pressure. So this is another thing, but the banking is a huge problem, I think.
Juraj, please comment.
Absolutely. I would like to go back and start with the last point, last item, which is the banking and what is the first problem of a startup in a fintech or crypto industry. And it's not compliance. The first problem is, shall I have the bloody bank account? Because you will not. And that's a problem because you are obliged as an entrepreneur, as a company, to have a bank account for the tax reasons and other reasons probably as well. But so if anybody of you wants to set up a new startup in crypto industry in Slovakia, you will have to obtain this virtual currency service license or trade license, so to say. And as soon as you have it in your trade register, no bank will ever open a bank account for you in Slovakia. So, no bank will ever ask about your compliance because they just don't analyze it. We have actually done quite a lot of work here and asked every bank around. So your only option is to open a bank account in UK or in Lithuania or possibly in German-speaking countries where there are crypto-specifically focused banks which know what to do and where the regulators actually know what to do, because there are quite sophisticated KYCC guidances, know your customer's customer, for the banks how to actually handle the crypto companies. But in Slovakia, you are done in the beginning, but you have still the small option to open a bank account in Lithuania, for example, in an e-money institution. If you want to set up a crypto company in Hungary, or Czech Republic, or Poland, it's even more difficult. If you want to set up a crypto company in Hungary, and you just obtain that similar registration as in Slovakia, no bank will open a bank account in Hungarian forints for you, and because it's Hungarian forints, you will never get any bank account, even if you are obliged to have one. So, and you didn't even start to do business at all. So this situation is clearly catch-22. It doesn't work. And I would like to go a little bit deeper to the AML part. I totally appreciate the let's say delegation of these duties to private sector. I'm really happy that we as a society are collectively managing this risk rather than having one centralized office coming after everybody. So that's one thing I like about it. And it helps us, the AML best practices help us really to avoid risky situations. And God knows we have had clients or wannabe clients who came with bags of money and wanted to buy crypto, and because we knew exactly how it works and what is around it, we knew how to handle it. So I'm happy for that. But in the end, what does it all boil down to? It just concentrates the criminality in a very well organized cartels that can find the way through by having a cover in politics. We have seen that in Slovakia a lot, and we have seen that around in other countries a lot. We have seen it in every country in EU, including Germany. So I would say we are going after small criminality, and we are forcing all criminal activity to come together and be super organized and so on. I don't think that the criminality as such, as you mentioned, the underlying crimes have been substantially reduced by this. So I don't know where it all goes, and if we maybe just focus on being rational, being proportional, maybe it will help us to find the right balance.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want
Lukáš.
to add something to the discussion. Is just when we were talking about establishing the bank account, that's a real problem for the business today, especially when you're working with crypto. But not only in crypto, actually, we got one very interesting case right now. It's we have one big logistic company from Turkey, one of the biggest actually, working in Europe in many countries, and they got problem open bank account in Slovakia. Come on, they have working company in Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, but Slovak banks have problem open the bank account, and they wanted so many documents from them, like they were like startup or nobody. So, and that's the problem of the KYC and compliance department of the banks, because it's a Turkish company. Turkey, I don't know if like Iran or I don't know which country it would be. It's Turkey, come on. It's a well-known company, and they got problem with it. So it's really making problem to do proper business here. So I would say, as Lukáš also said, it's really problem when AML is stopping the business, or is making problem to establish a business as such, and without bank account you cannot actually do it. So the main issue today is, I think, the link between the real business world and the bank and AML to make it easier how to work and evaluate the processes when it comes to AML and the risk approachment especially, and not just stop or make a problem for business or companies to do business. Open a bank account is one thing, let them operate, and then we will see. For example, that's one attitude you can have actually. Open a bank account, and then we will see.
Maybe the process of opening a bank account should be standardized in Slovakia and the European Union, so banks cannot come up with their own ideas what papers and documentation they need. Could that be a solution on an EU level, since we discussed that before? We'll talk more about that later, possibly.
Right,
I want to invite Maria soon as well.
Just one thing. I think in Czech Republic it was the initiative, the right for the bank account.
Sorry, could you repeat it?
Right for open the bank account for everyone, That would be very nice.
Yes, EU citizens have the right to open bank accounts by law, and even going up to EU court and the EU Commission in some cases. But B2B is different. There's contractual law and not the EU law. EU law is only protecting citizens, not businesses.
Yeah, but if you have an address and you have company established according to European law, you are also considered as a European legal entity, and you should have the right as well. Or it should have.
I completely agree with you, but that's not the current case. Only physical people and citizens have that right currently.
Yeah.
That's the law, I can confirm.
If we speak about the rights, I would like to go much farther here. And I would like to say that, in my mind, it should be considered a human and civil right to have not bank account, but to have and operate any kind of money one wish to operate and possess. So that would mean crypto, non-custodial wallets, whatever kind of money. Because if you consider in the US, it's considered constitutional right to carry a gun, and it's considered a matter of human dignity. How come the people are then somehow bullied around what kind of money they use for the transactions? So that's about the rights, but I would like to come back to your point that maybe we should regulate more so that the banks don't do what they want to do. I'm really scared about this approach, and I would like to see the answer to wrong impacts or unintended impacts of regulation in less regulation rather than in more regulation. And I would love to have more liberty in doing business, and more liberty in doing business will focus or will result in more institutions wanting to do business just for the business reasons. As we have crypto banks, because there can be crypto banks, but in small countries like Slovakia and Czech Republic and so on, the competition is just too small, and I don't want to say it's a cartel, it's definitely not, but the competition is too small for such solutions to emerge.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more with Juraj. Actually, the more regulation is not always necessarily the best idea, especially in terms of compliance. I mean, we have FATF recommendation, Manival, European directives, Slovak law, recommendation from Financial Intelligence Unit, National Bank of Slovakia. There's more guidelines, as you can imagine, actually. And it's not that not a problem that we don't have guidelines. We don't know how to conduct due diligence, and we need more stricter approach from regulators. It's not about it. And definitely, what I would like to point out here, I am of the opinion that obliged entities, regulated entities, not just in Slovakia, across Europe, shouldn't really complement the work of law enforcement agency, because we are operating in a public sector, and it's not like we should be prosecuting criminals. It's not the responsibility of regulated entities operating in fintech sector. It really not. So that's maybe the problem, because especially huge banks are expected to do so, in my view. Maybe that's the reason why many well-established banks are afraid to work with high-risk entities in terms of geographical point of view, business model point of view, etc. So that's something we should really appreciate and say it out loud.
Please, Lukáš. Please, Lukáš.
Very quickly, I completely agree. We need less regulation and better regulation, because it is very difficult just to follow everything. And this is the problem of de-risking and debanking. And the solution is not to have right to open the bank account, because at the end, this is a private transaction. So the bank should have the right to decide about the customer. This is one thing. And if the banks are pressured to open anything, again, this is not very good, because the risks from the AML are burdened on the bank. So if they will have to open anything, then they possibly can get fined, or they can lose the license. So we need less regulation, and to leave it on the private transactions, and the bank or the financial sector and all the obliged entities should not be prosecutors. Definitely, this is not our specialty. We are providing services to customers. We are not prosecuting officers. Therefore, in some way, it should be within the scope of the private companies, but you should not decide whether this is a criminal activity, because you don't know the details what are behind it. And if you need to follow some rules, then you rather do not accept the client, because if you made some wrong decision, you can get fined or lose the license. So you rather decide that you will not onboard any high-risk client. But at the end, it should be standard client. And when we look on the national risk assessment, you see that the real offenses are very low compared to suspicious transactions reports. The seizures and the frozen assets and the proceedings from the AML regulation is very low. Therefore, the criminal activities are probably not lowered. They are just more sophisticated. So, as Juraj mentioned, probably only the small fishes are caught, and we are losing all the complex and wrong transactions because they are very, very sophisticated. So I do not agree that we need more regulation, we need less, and we should have more liberal approach to the business transactions, at least within the EU countries.
Just a small comment or remark from my side regarding the SAR's topic, or Suspicious Activity Report. Actually, it's the way I see it, there is a huge pressure from regulators, not necessarily in Slovakia, I mean, generally speaking, in Europe, to report as many SARs as possible. And it's not always the best approach within the sector, because sometimes obliged entities, especially banks, because banks are the obliged entities that report the majority of SARs in Slovakia. I assume they report a transaction that they don't necessarily know what actually is wrong with the transaction. They just, they have a feeling that maybe something, I just rather report it because it's, safe way, it's easier way, and I don't want to get fined at the end of the day or just lose a license, so I'll just report everything. And it just creates unnecessary burden for financial intelligence unit officers as well, because they have a lot of suspicious transaction reported, and many of them, I would assume, doesn't really have any value added. So that's a problem. And that's a lot of administrative work within the FIU to somehow process those reports, and they don't have maybe time to concentrate on things and the reports that are actually meaningful. That's my way how to maybe it's good to do something about it. And
Please, Lukáš.
A very quick remark. The situation, as you mentioned, about the suspicious activities reports, that the financial institutions rather report everything. This is correct for some countries.
Scandinavian countries. I'm from the region, and they're reporting more than anywhere else in the whole European Union. So the financial authorities, they're flooded with these reports and cannot do their job. But the banks are scot-free and have nothing to worry about.
But the other extreme, what is not good, is the France, for example. In France, you can report only if you know that this is the real money laundering. But how can a financial institution know this? In some cases, maybe it is possible to know this information, but now in the France, they are completely delegating all the prosecutions, investigation to the financial institutions or obliged entities in general. This was the situation maybe 3 years ago from the last report. Maybe it has changed. So I'm speaking about the 2-3 years back in the history. But this is another extreme. What is maybe even more wrong for the companies, because then you need to hire specialists to investigate all the reports. And the way of the reporting is different between every countries, like the Netherlands and the Germany. And for example, Italy is producing plenty of reports. And they are reporting more things than the other countries, and of course the Scandinavian countries.
Thank you. Please, Juraj.
Just 10 seconds. In my mind, the problem here is that if you have this organized criminality that wants to go around the system somehow, probably using some gastronomy networks to launder cash, I guess. But even if they want to use bank accounts because they need to use them in the end somehow, how convenient it is if all the financial institutions just flood the system with useless SARs. So if you remember, in Slovakia, there has been some sort of network spread around the government and other, also in financial institutions quite recently, and probably there are others as well. So it's much easier for them to hide in such a system if the financial institutions just go around everything and chase every glittery thing around, and they just need to, get 1 or 2 compliance officers responsible to allow them to keep the gate open for them, and nobody will ever notice it. So, and the other way, to force the financial institutions to investigate, is also a wrong way, as Lukáš said. So it's definitely a problem of balance, a problem of hysteria, a problem of somehow finding the way together, not to be penalized too much, encouraging the private sector to be cooperative in a civic sense of the word, to be like proud citizens who want to help, rather than people who just file reports not to get fined. And this is how I see it as a crypto company founder, that it's part of my responsibility to prevent money laundering in some big scale. That's why I am happy to do it, but I would like to see it more relaxed and more in a cooperative way, like a public-private partnerships where we can discuss things and learn from each other, rather than enforcement and panic and filing everything.
Do we need an AML sandbox approach where you can try different AML approaches and see how they work without any legal repercussions? Could that be a solution?
So let me come back. For us and for anybody who wants to set up a startup that would be an obliged entity, and there are new obliged entities as well, and I think maybe in the next wave, even accountants will be obliged, and maybe they are even now. So I guess it would be probably necessary to set up some sort of education and a way how to learn how to do things without being penalized for not doing it right from the start. Really get into the sandbox and start playing with it.
My next question is kind of provocative. Have AML become a system of ticking the right boxes or actually fighting crime?
Okay, so I may comment on that. Well, it's a good question, and I'm not a real big fan of this ticking box exercise, but seeing the AML compliance in practice for more than 5-6 years now, it is actually the case. It's not a good way to how to deal with the regulation and how to approach this thing, but actually it is the problem. It's a huge problem, especially from my experience, for huge and well-established banks, because they have a lot of compliance officers, and they are not necessarily, communicate with each other. It's like it really depends who is dealing with your application, and sometimes you are lucky, sometimes you're not, because you're dealing with a compliance officer who's just covering his job, and it just I don't want to get to any trouble with my superiors, etc. So I'll just stick with this ticking box exercise, and there is a company who may have a problem because this document is not entirely up to date, and I've just reviewed this AML program of this wannabe client of a bank as an example, and in my reasonable opinion, this AML program is not sufficient, not detailed enough, so I just decide to reject the application. And that's in my opinion, a huge problem.
Juraj.
Yeah, I would like to maybe push the discussion a little bit to the crypto direction, because we are seeing an emerging trend of Web3, and as we are sitting here with the fintech experts and legal experts in crypto, that's something we can also discuss, because it's quite likely that just connecting your wallet to your browser in Web3 environment will basically leave out the financial intermediaries. So who will be the obliged entity then? That's my question here. Will in the next wave the e-shops become obliged entities themselves? So we also need to think about these perspectives, because once Web3 is fully propagated and technologically advanced, there will be no more need for a lot of card processing in internet and so on. People will just connect their MetaMask or similar private key solution, and they will interact financially with any service they want in the internet. So who will do this job then? That's I think something that we could discuss here, because in 5 years it's here.
That is very true. We get more and more peer-to-peer finance solutions. So who is the middleman? Who will be sure that the partner is compliant? Will that lay up on the peers themselves, or some authority, or how should this be solved? I don't think anybody in the legislative branch have been thinking about this to date, but it will come up soon, as you say, Juraj. Is there any proactive approach you could think of? Or Lukáš, you have something to comment here?
I wouldn't say the proactive approach, but what I think will happen in the future is that when we are talking, for example, about MetaMask, there was a discussion, or a light discussion a few months ago with my friends about it in crypto, and there might be an option that everyone who will provide the services of such wallet will maybe have the option to, or will be obliged person.
But MetaMask is self-hosted, and you can have,
Yeah.
It's really about the fact that you can do the payments peer-to-peer in Web3, and as long as you can connect your private keys to the browser, there is no provider of wallet in the end.
Yeah, but might in the future happen that only wallets which won't be self-hosted will be allowed.
Now we come to the question of constitutional rights here, because if that happens, then we are really far away from our original democratic setup here, because that would really definitely infringe on our liberties to transact with each other.
But what about bank accounts? It's not the same?
Well, that's just we are not limited to use the bank accounts in a theoretical way, only in practical way. So it's not in the law that a crypto company cannot open a bank account, and it's just a phenomenon that emerged somehow. It's definitely a different situation than if the law says you can't hold your money. So there's a completely different angle, and if we are not allowed to hold our electronic money by the law, and we are obliged to have a provider of such service, we are no longer in the realm of a liberal democracy.
Yeah, it's true from the constitutional point of view, but as I said, if they want to find some solution, the solution has to be somewhere, and they will try to find it. So I think that's one way how to do it. Another way is that if you want to connect your wallet to any services and use it, then the service provider has to, identify the owner of the wallet. So that's another option, which was actually on the table right now when the MiCA was discussed. So there are several ways how to do it actually. And I think one of them will take place actually and will happen. So we'll see which one of them will be.
What about the solution with individual financial IDs from the authorities that make you as a person authorized to use different services because you can show where your money comes from?
So that would be definitely one solution, like European identity, and then we would speak about a new form of obligor entities, because the e-shops could only provide services to somebody who has identified themselves. That's something that I would consider probably much more okay than the other options we discussed, because we are putting these obligations on the businesses rather than on individuals. But there is also another way, and that's basically online transaction monitoring and online KYT tools that can help businesses track the history of the payment on the blockchain and see if it comes from any criminal activity. So you don't even need to identify the actor if you identify the track of the money in the whole history of the blockchain somehow. So maybe there are ways how to combine these two approaches, so the people would get their identity, which they could basically prove who they are, and at the same time the e-shops can just scan the blockchain before getting the transaction, and so these may be the solutions for future.
Sure, but in any phase of this, if you track in transactions, you can track anything you want. But if there is no identification in one moment, then the tracking of the transaction is useless actually, because you don't know who is involved.
Well, how OFAC lists work for crypto addresses? Usually there is a team of people scanning the fundraising for the terrorist organizations, or some addresses associated with individuals during a police investigation. For example, somebody stole my cryptocurrencies. I know who it is. I submit a filing to the police, and they start connecting the address that I provided with that person. And there is a connection. So in OFAC, they usually see that, for example, this organization is fundraising to this address, so that's how that address gets into the blacklist.
Yeah, but there is some kind of identification actually, because on the police part, so without the identification in any phase of this or in any moment of these transactions, if there has to be some, otherwise you cannot connect it to certain or to some persons or area of persons. So. When we are talking about the wallets as such, so there has to be identification in one moment, if you wanna do the KYC properly.
So probably these digital identity solutions would help when interacting with shops, and for peer-to-peer payments you probably don't need it, and that could be quite the compromise we need here. But we are not the regulators, so we can discuss anything we wish here.
Well, we're still allowed to pay peer-to-peer with hard-earned cash, so I don't really see any difference here when it's just peer-to-peer, especially if it's consumer-to-consumer more than consumer-to-business.
Well, that's actually a very good question today. When we are talking about security in finance in terms of digital activities. But for example, let's talk about real estate business. It's very interesting. What happened now in the UK, for example, if you want to buy real estate in UK, you have to register in the registry officially. Otherwise, you cannot buy real estate in UK today. Or it started in 2023. I'm not sure right now. So as you can see, also in Slovakia today, there's a lot of money laundering in real estate. Plenty real estate agencies. They are still like selling properties, taking money in cash, and there's quite a big problem with it, and it's a $1 million euro business. So I would discuss also this area. And
also not necessarily cash. There's real estate transaction where you pay with different assets instead, including equities and such transactions to muddy the picture basically. So instead of using cash or bank transactions, you pay with equities and similar solutions.
About the cash, you cannot use peer-to-peer payments in cash over 15,000 euros. So definitely.
But it's impossible to track it. That's what I'm trying to say here.
It is impossible, but somehow at the end probably you need a way to put it into the standard financial sector, because in the normal way, you cannot, for example, buy car in the cash. It is restricted. So, therefore, we have some restrictions on cash, especially in Slovakia, not in the Austria. In Austria, you can use cash completely freely. And about the real estate, according to current AML regulation in Slovakia, they are actually obliged entities. Probably they just do not know it, or they don't do the AML procedures, but they are obliged entities.
Good to know. What essential advice would you offer to companies seeking to create a robust AML program that is future-proofed right now? There's a new question for the whole panel. Robust advice to create an AML program designed for the future, starting implementation now. So just very short, what should companies do if there's or a startup, for example, not a current incumbent, but if you're starting from scratch, what robust advice would you give to them?
Well, maybe I'll just quickly comment on that. It's not necessarily about the topic as we briefly touched before, the ticking box exercise, but rather about some trying to understand the needs of your customers, your business model, why the customers is actually willing to use your services, what's your added value, and just try to use like common sense in terms of AML and not necessarily just follow every single letter of the law without even thinking about it. That's always a good approach.
So not just an off-the-shelf reg tech solution, plug it in and hope it works. You wouldn't think that would work very well.
It might, but not just without human input. Because
So sorry, a reg tech solution can mostly help you with KYC, with onboarding, but it won't help you with the AML, CFT part at all, or just a little bit. You can check the sanction list, you can check the adverse media, or politically exposed persons, but that's more about the KYC and onboarding part. When it comes to analyzing the source of wealth, the current solutions are not ready for that at all, and I'm not sure if there ever will be, because the clients can have very different sources of wealth that should be really thought about. And it's not about the data mining and just comparing numbers. So I would say, as a startup, you definitely need a RegTech solution. There are some that I could recommend, but you cannot start a startup in an obliged entity field without having one co-founder understanding the situation profoundly. I have to say, we were, for example, as a Fumbi, we were in this unlucky situation. When we started, we were not obliged persons, but the financial institutions thought we should be obliged persons. So we started without a deep understanding. We had a voluntary AML policy, even if we were not obliged, but that's completely different than knowing the best practices, knowing the people in the field, attending the workshops and so on. And I wouldn't recommend to start in the crypto industry or similar without having a deep knowledge here. And probably if there is nobody among the co-founders that would be an expert in this topic, they should just use the consulting services such as here Lukáš may provide, and some others, to get knowledgeable.
Consulting service, can you also outsource your AML? Could that be a possibility?
Yes, but then you don't have a co-founder understanding what's happening.
That is true, but I could think about firms building up the expertise and basically having there's a business model to provide AML services.
So just last remark from my side. Yes, that's definitely helpful, but still somebody from the board needs to be completely knowledgeable, and maybe not an expert, but understand deeply what's happening.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's about let's focus on the term KYC. Know your client, know your customer. It's not necessarily just about, collecting IDs, utility bills, some questionnaires about source of funds, source of wealth, information about other bank accounts, etc. It's really about knowing who is your customer, why he's using your services, and what is usual for this transaction behavior, this client vis-a-vis your services, what is potentially suspicious, what deviates from the expected transaction flow, and that's something you cannot really outsource to a third party.
I see your point, but this with unexpected transactions. I mean, most people have unexpected transactions, and those are probably not the ones that you should be suspicious about. Illegal transactions, you probably try to hide them in the bulk of very normal-looking transactions instead of the few ones that stand out. At least that's what my criminal mind will tell me to do.
Let me give you an example. For example, we had a client with maybe a couple of thousand euros only in the cryptocurrencies held by us for him, and then after some time he came back saying that he would like to buy maybe for 200,000-300,000 euros, and of course I was curious what's happening, and just after the conversation it emerged that those are not his funds. He didn't even understand that borrowing money from some Israeli company, we don't even know who they are, and depositing it in cryptocurrency for them somehow is a regulated business activity that he shouldn't be doing. And just discussing this client maybe helped him get out of a lot of troubles in the future. And maybe from the regulator side, maybe from the police side, but maybe from the lender side. Who knows who they are, So this is why you need somebody in the company who understands it and can help the clients even to understand what's happening.
I'm happy you helped that client because he would be in big troubles otherwise.
Yeah, actually, that's the point that a lot of people do not understand actually what is the AML and what criminal activity can actually do if they do certain kind of financial transactions, and people don't understand that money laundering is actually criminal activity, and so on. So that's one thing. But when coming back to your question that what startup or what company should do, well, especially they should evaluate what they are doing, how their business is risky when it comes to AML, Whereas crypto companies, they are high risky companies they are, but we know it, actually. So when we are only opening the bank account, it's quite complicated. So it's a quite high risky business, and you should think about it. So without proper AML program, you cannot do it. But when you are a startup, what you can do is that, at the beginning, you can do it manually somehow, but it won't help you when it comes to transactions as such. And if you want to open a bank account, you need to prove to the bank, especially when we are working with our clients, that you have monitoring services, you have coin tracking services, you have verification, very high technical, really verification process. So without it, you cannot do it. So that's the point. What I can recommend is to have budget for it, especially when you are doing with crypto. Without it, you cannot start working today in this industry. And no bank will open your bank account, actually, and they won't work with you because it's really risky if you do not have automated processes, how to track transactions, how to do proper KYC at the beginning. So without it, you cannot do it. And in later stages, when you would like to really know source of funds of your client or source of wealth, that's the moment when the knowledge of this industry is demanded, and you need it when you are the managing director of the company, or you need to have someone in the company who really understands AML in details. In Slovakia, you can outsource certain services, but you won't. But still, the managing director will be reliable for all losses, for all the images and everything. But you can hire. So there will be the managing director, or you can hire a professional ML officer who will be responsible for that. He has to be employed in your company, and then he will be communicating with financial intelligence unit and so on. So, but as Juraj said, without actually good knowledge of this industry and this AML, you won't be able to do it properly.
Why is crypto considered so risky? What's the main issues here?
Yep. Let me start on that. It's considered risky for two reasons. One is that it can be risky, and the other one, there is a myth that is perpetrating since Silk Road, when crypto was somehow connected in the media, and quite rightfully with those transactions, even if in the end Bitcoin was what helped prosecute the founder of Silk Road and to convict him actually. But still, it was connected in the public awareness with crime. The reality, due to the chain analysis technology that we currently possess, by we I mean the mankind, we know that crypto is actually less risky than the rest of the financial system. So if you consider that 2 to 5% of the global GDP is laundered every year, which comes from the UN data. In crypto is probably much lower than 1%. The current data say, for example, 0.15%. If you leave 5 to 10 years for the number for the current year to grow up because of the newly discovered crimes, you could get to 0.5, 0.6%. And chain analysis technology actually prevents all the hackers from enjoying the hacked and stolen funds. They rather return it, saying it was a white hat hack, getting some commission from that. So in general, crypto is less risky. But if crypto was so widely adopted by public, this number would probably go up, and maybe it could go to the average. Nevertheless, there are different business models in crypto, so that's something that is more important to understand. If you operate a crypto ATM or a network of crypto ATMs, in my mind, you should be obliged, and there should be some quite smaller limit for KYC redeemed transactions, maybe 500 euros, I don't know. Because if you have 50 guys from a mafia turning over cash for crypto and back, they can turn over quite massive amounts. But if you have a business model where you receive money from a bank account of your customer and then return it to the bank account of your customer, then there is actually zero risk.
That's what I meant too, because most crypto accounts are small consumer accounts with maybe a couple of €1,000. I mean, even if you can launder money, but the accounts are small with a couple of €1,000, imagine how many hundreds of accounts you would need to be able to launder substantial amounts of money. Is it better to focus on the whales in the industry, basically, and ignore the small fish because they're just simply too small to be of any higher interest?
Well, absolutely. I'm really unhappy about the limits that are considered best practice here. For example, for the source of wealth investigation, in my mind, the proper limit would be maybe 50,000 euros in a total deposit of the client. But the current best practice on the market is 10,000 euros, which is not far away from a completely reachable amount for a median customer or average customer. And this means that there is a lot of work, a lot of burden on the customer side, and absolutely no result out of that. So I think the limits here should be connected to the business model and its riskiness as such. So the ATMs should have low limits. The services which operate a closed loop, like most of the time Fumbi does, they're actually quite out of risk completely. There's no no option how to launder money through such service. But if you pay crypto to your customers as a crypto withdrawal, well, then you should just mitigate the risk by applying chain analysis measures and so on, and ongoing monitoring of the funds. So this is easy. It's just necessary to speak with the regulators together so that we all understand the situation and then set up the proper guidelines for everybody.
If I may, just briefly comment on that.
Oh yes, and we have one more topic to cover.
Okay, so just I'll be really quick to cover this topic. So going back to the original questions or question in this area, why crypto is considered as risky. In my view, not every single crypto company is created equal, especially as Juraj said. And the reason why all the industry is sort of afraid of working with crypto companies is because there are some bad players in the industry, but they're everywhere, in every single sector, every single industry. It's not necessarily just the crypto. And yet we know a lot of publicly available, stories and rumors about some crypto investment scams, etc. But not every single crypto company is operating within this business model, within this shady area. So that's something we should keep in mind.
True that. And the last questions. What are your predictions for AML threat trends through 2022 and beyond? How are regulation likely to evolve? This is pure speculation, clearly, but if I can have some last words from each four of you on this topic before we round this off.
But we partially already know the answer.
That is true.
Because it is AML 6 directive which will be adopted. Therefore, it will be more strict, unfortunately. And hopefully the EU will rethink the position in the future, but this is just a hope that they will be more risk-based and they will evaluate the achievements of the policy and outcomes of the policy and the burden of the policies. But definitely we will see more strict regulation.
I would like to kidnap this question a little bit and move it towards some political risk associated with the strictness that we are observing. First of all, we are following multiple sanction lists. In Slovakia, we are obliged to follow the European sanction list, but there are also the US sanction list. Some companies used to follow Russian, Chinese sanction lists as well, which are, strictly speaking, geopolitical adversaries at best. And we have, for example, Turkey in NATO, which is our ally in a way, but at the same time doesn't share the same view on liberal democratic values as the most of the Western countries. So imagine that we have this level of strictness where you just need to follow the list, and because of geopolitical situation, we are forced to follow Turkish sanctions list, which basically means we will put all the political opponents, all the democratic thinkers in Turkey on sanction list, and we will not able to provide services to them. So this is something that is, in my mind, underway, and maybe Sweden have some experience now with Turkey and with joining NATO and so on. But enough of that. Another point is that Web3 will come too, and even if we are strict, we have AML 6 and everything. In 3 to 5 years, maybe 6 years, we will have somehow intermediary-free internet payment ecosystem, and I just hope that we will not be caught with our pants down, so to say, and completely off guard.
Thank you.
Well, I will maybe follow up what Lukáš said about the regulation, which is going really, again, more restricted or strict. I like what GDPR made in this world, that it made the world of personal data protection more neutral, technologically neutral, and changed the way how it was implemented in our world before and how it is now. So I would expect that the AML policy and the anti-money laundering legislative should change also this way, and maybe change the philosophy how it should be implemented. I would not expect that it would happen soon, but maybe when the new technologies like Web3 will come more into the reality, they will have to realize that this is not the way how it works. And but I think it does not work today. The AML as such, we can see, we discussed it, and the approach should be changed.
Thank you. And Maria.
Okay, so answering your original question about the regulation going forward, I believe there is one topic we haven't quite covered during this session when it comes to future regulations. So I'll just briefly mention it, and that's the central register of accounts maintained by Ministry of Finance, I guess. It's going to be effective from 1st of January 2023. And that's actually a huge topic here in Slovakia, because it may improve the cooperation of especially police and other authorities within the criminal investigation, and it may actually help to free some funds, etc. And ideally speaking, we'll see about it later. It may help financial institution to lower the burden of answering all those formal requests. Whether here is some company we are investigating. Do you maintain any account for this company? And you have a lot of requests on the table when you are a bank or other financial institution in Slovakia. So this process at least will be automated in a way that we will have some central register of accounts.
Thank you. Now, any questions from the audience? We have a few minutes for a few questions from the audience. Anyone have any questions?
Hello, I cannot agree more with what the speaker said, but there is one topic which was not touched. We are speaking about possibility to trace the blockchain, but what about currencies like Monero, like privacy coins? Isn't it really a serious threat as well?
So currently, privacy coins do not have any big liquidity or capitalization. So from that perspective, it's not a threat yet. It could become though, and it could be a threat in the same sense that cash is a threat. If cash was able to be transported all around the world in a telecommunication channel, so I think it could be a threat. And in my mind, the compromise between the current legacy system of financial industry and the legal system around it and the law enforcement and crypto ecosystem will be that the privacy coins would be probably somehow, if not outlawed, then definitely pushed to the marginal stand of being, I would say. So yes and no. We will see those coins around, but they will probably be somehow banned from growing to be substantial.
And if I may, there is some unwritten rule about such privacy coins as Monero, and there is some sort of expectation from financial institutions vis-a-vis crypto companies not support and not work with such currencies as part of some due diligence process from financial institution like bank vis-a-vis a crypto company as its clients. So that's, in my view, some unwritten rule.
And I would like to add that I would love if such privacy coins would still stay as a marginal part of the system, because we are also facing the hard threat of a democratic system breakdown. And so it's our hard insurance in case that the government in several EU countries are taken by undemocratic forces, which can happen, then probably the citizens of such countries would be really happy if they had a privacy-focused networks. So if we have good governance and good governments, it's good to not use such systems, but as soon as we get into troubles, it's also very good to have them at hand.
Any more questions? We have time for one more question.
Thank you very much for the very wonderful discussion. I'm from the Japanese embassy here in Bratislava. I used to work on the establishing the gaming industry regulation in Japan, and in that case, we discussed a lot in Japan how to treat with the suspicious transaction report. And of course, Japan also uses this AML report. But just for the sake of the understanding, to what extent this suspicious transaction report is putting the pressure on the regulator in this country, do you have any idea how many suspicious transaction reports are reported to the financial intelligence unit here in Slovakia? Thank you.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, I can't give you the exact number from top of my head, obviously. But we have regulatory representatives here as well, so maybe they want to comment on that. But from my experience, and I've briefly read the National Risk Assessment Report, we're talking about some tens of thousands report, I guess, and if I'm not mistaken, just correct me if I'm wrong. And mostly we are talking about suspicious activity reports that are reported by banks directly. And there are just a few reported by other obliged entities as well. That's my understanding, at least.
I can say that for us, we filed just really a couple of them, and those are mostly, young people using wrong ID of their friend rather than theirs. So it's a mostly problem of banks, I guess.
So we finished this session, and the next session will start in about 15 minutes due to the delay. So there won't be any real lunch break. We start in about 15 minutes with the next session. But first, I would like to thank Mária, Lukáš, and Juraj for this fantastic panel discussion on a very, very important topic, AML.